Mm. Welcome back to Equal Time Soccer. I'm Mark Pravratsky, and I never left. I'm here with Matt Pravratsky. We are about to do another Aurora pregame show. It's exciting because we got the intrastate matchup with Rochester FC. The Loons are two USL W League squads. Yeah, excited for the matchup, Matt. I wanted to start off by letting people know where the teams stand because we're nearing the halfway point after this weekend for some teams. They'll be over it, playing 6 of the 12 games. Chicago City sits up top with 13 points. It will be actually tough for Aurora to catch them if they don't drop points. River Lights has 10. Aurora does have a game in hand on those squads. So if they win today, they would still be 2 points back of City. So regardless, little room for error. And then Bavarian has 7, Rochester has 6, coming off 2 wins. We'll talk about that. And then Third Coast and Dutch Lions are only 1 point and 0 points. So that's the stratification. But yeah, for Matt, as we're looking to teams looking at the playoffs, we talked a bit off air, more teams in the league this year. So it only gets tougher, although our conference is similar, right? So last year, 4 teams made it. That's the format again this time. So there's only a chance to get a wild card for 1 team in this division, right? So break down how it looks for the Heartland chances of getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, every game already is a must win because you essentially have to win the division to be guaranteed a spot because the wild card between the Great Lakes and Heartland is entirely out of your control because we don't know what that second place team and the Heartland will end up with in terms of points per match, which is the tiebreaker, or I should just say it is the determinant of how we finish. So
Yeah.
right now, Midwest United, for example, is 2.4 points per match. If you just pretended things ended right now, they would claim the wild card. So, there's plenty of wins left on the table for Chicago City, Riverlight, and or Minnesota Aurora. But you just have to get every single one of those wins. I think it's fairly safe to say the only way you have any comfort at all in the Heartland is if you win the division. And so this weekend is absolutely huge. Maybe on paper, the Rochester game is more winnable for Aurora, but Rochester's not going to see it that way. They're going to defend their butts off. Amanak, a huge athletic keeper in the goal. And let's not forget, Rochester gave Aurora maybe its toughest game last year, or one of the toughest games, held them to a 1-goal win down at RCTC. So I would expect them to battle like crazy tonight. I would expect them to drink in this Minnesota crowd. I bet there'll be a ton of Rochester fans there because it's a short drive. So yeah, the playoff picture essentially is win every single game or you might just not make the playoffs.
Yeah, the Great Lakes is a really solid conference. And even like Detroit City, who is kind of like you would say a sleeping giant, given all the culture and like infrastructure they have as a club overall, they hadn't been winning in the first couple years of the league, and now they are. And so what a fun team if we got to play there. I talk about an away trip if you got to go to Detroit City,
or even Detroit City coming here. I mean, I think the thing for Aurora is they didn't get to host last year. They had to go to Flint, and the only way they're going to be able to host is if the venue dates work out, that all the other teams bidding happen to fall short on the bidding matrix, whatever that scoring sheet is, and then Aurora has to win the damn division. You're not going to get to host unless you have an overly impressive resume, and there's no person on earth that would be more excited for Aurora to play Detroit City in the playoffs than me. There are 3 Gophers on that squad. It would be an absolute blast to like Sophia Romine already hit a banger that was everywhere on Insta. Kate Childers is there. Kate Childers' older sister Allie is there. They're all Michigan kids, and they're starring for their sort of quote unquote hometown squad in Detroit City. They have been, but you're right, they've been so good. And so, before Aurora can write any of those playoff plans, they basically have to continue to win out starting tonight against Rochester and Saturday against Riverlight.
And for Rochester, not quite the year to look at this point, looking at the playoffs, but an exciting year for them because they are making the steps you need to improve and be a contender in the following years. They have their first win streak. I'm not even saying that tongue in cheek because getting your first win streak matters. They have 2 wins in a row. They beat Dutch Lions away last weekend. So you have to imagine that's giving them confidence. Team definitely looks just more talented, more resilient. What do you expect from Rochester facing Aurora today?
I mean, Rochester's going to face a lot of pressure. You've seen from Aurora what they want to do is start on the front foot and be really aggressive moving forward. A little bit of rotation in the Aurora squad, and we can get into that whenever you want to. But
Mhm.
I would expect, based on the lineup I'm seeing, that Aurora does come out with a fairly high line because they have an athletic front five from what I'm seeing on the sheet. And I think they're going to press Rochester and see if they can get one early, because the dynamic in these summer league games, similar to college games, is any of these teams can play really well for 20 or 30 minutes. You know, all these players are fit enough that they can show their best for that long. Where Aurora has always made its hay is by breaking teams down by the depth of their roster, by their fitness, by their level of training, and they do that later in the game. So the thing to watch is, does any team able to get a goal in that first 20 to 30 minutes where everyone is fresh? Because that's a huge momentum swinger in a league like this, where that first 20 to 30 should be when it's tightest. And so if a team is able to get on the board through that press or through a set piece or through some good luck, that's a big, big challenge for the other team to overcome.
So looking at Aurora in the form they're in, I mean, it's not been easy. They've gotten, a few draws that were maybe a bit frustrating. You'd say probably fair draws in terms of like the actual performance on the field, in terms of what I've been able to watch when I wasn't behind the bar. Last game, speaking of, we were watching it at Blackheart. It was a bit tough to capture a lot of the game flow for the stream for the fans.
Yeah.
So for you were there on the ground, which is nice about one of the benefits we have at Equal Time. What were your takeaways from the game? Was there frustration from you of in terms of not seeing gameplay work as well as it could in the matchup?
I think, to be honest, anyone who was on the ground for that game where Aurora was at City playing at Loyola, I think the top line thing you have to talk about is the officiating, not in any egregious, criminal way, but the first half, essentially what you saw, and I maybe even posted this in the game day thread, is the official was sort of letting everything go. So there was a lot of contact, very, very few whistles. And even at I think my halftime tweet, I might've said, like, she might need to start whistling some of this, because especially in summer league where games can be chaotic, you really don't want to risk like the injury and all that kind of stuff. The issue was in the second half, she did start calling a lot more fouls, but I think the Aurora staff felt it was fairly uneven, and I felt they were getting, more than their fair share of the whistles. But I think you're right. I think it's a hard fought draw. You can't see either the Riverlight game or the City game for Aurora and say anything other than the fact that they're their two biggest challenges in the conference. I mean, clearly coming away with road ties. I think Colette Montgomery, the head coach and sporting director for Aurora, has a really funny way of talking about ties, where she says the game started a tie, it ended the tie, so you have to be happy. And I don't like 100% follow the logic, but it's her mentality.
Definitely coach speak, though. I like that's kind of like a football coach, an American football coach speak. A little more clever than that, but yeah.
I do think the scheduling format in a conference like this, where you have the home and home, to get the draws on the road is a quality result. I mean, Aurora fans would love if they're winning every single game and getting shutouts every single game. But the truth is, if you want decent amounts of parity in the conference, you're going to get a road draw. You might even get a loss. Like Aurora has yet to lose in the regular season. But you could say that that's as much about, whatever, league quality as anything else. So, yeah, I think the Chicago game really showed sort of how games feel when they get really tight. It's worth noting that a player like Katie Duong was not in the game day 18 in that game, because there are certain players on this Aurora roster that I think when a game becomes a slog, and this happens in college too, folks will remember me talking about this in college, when a game becomes a slog and the run of play just cannot be adjusted by either team, you need a player or a couple players who can just engineer a situation. They can just somehow bend the defense, somehow create an opportunity. And Duong is that type of player just because of her tactical ability. And so she is back in the game day 18. She is in the starting 11. And so I think you're going to see, when games get really tight, you're going to see which players are able to sort of just bend that dynamic of run of play when it slogs down into mud.
Yeah, Katie Duong's one of those players. They definitely have some other options on the bench too, depending on who they start with. Joe is a really creative player who can unlock some things when you have the Rap sisters on the bench, or like being able to bring Rami in the middle or on the wing. Options and more coming back all the time. We saw more attackers come back from injury. Some people get different starts too, so there's a little bit more rotation in terms of who's playing up top. Sophie French has been there today. It may be someone different. We don't know exactly. Could be Lydia Rupert. Could be Cat Rapp. Yeah. One other thing about Aurora, and then a couple things we'll finish with Rochester. We asked yesterday. We had a live stream during the Aurora 2 and Flora game, and we were able to get some people who were in the stands, so that paid off. So Colette Montgomery came in, the Raps all came in. If you want to check out, we talked to Coach Jade Smith of St. Cloud State. If you want to check that out, it is on our YouTube and on the social. It's a bit long. You could skip through and find stuff. I think like 27 minutes and 30 seconds was the time when Jade gave me credit for being bulletin board material. So still vibing on that. But we asked Coach Montgomery, long tangent. We asked her yesterday, what was one thing that she tangibly wants to improve in her squad overall? And she said the tenacity and grit, and not necessarily just physicality, but just attitude and going at the team. And I think maybe you were getting into that, Matt, where probably wanting them to have the intensity to get the game on their side earlier and put it away. What do you take from that?
I mean, I love that answer from Colette. I think, the issue in these summer leagues is that sometimes the conference play is a certain level and the playoffs are another level. The teams Aurora plays in the playoffs are absolutely stacked. They are stacked. To be honest with you, on paper, I think almost every team they've played in the playoffs, you could argue has a higher pedigree than Aurora. I don't know, other than playing, I mean, these teams are loaded with Power 5 kids who have
would have higher transfer market value.
Yeah, players who have played pro, players who have played at, big time ACC, SEC colleges, all that kind of stuff. And listen, we cover D2, we cover mid-major. We're not people who care about that kind of stuff as much as other people, but it is just a fact that other rosters on paper are more loaded. I think it'll be interesting to see which players are able to bring that kind of a grit. I think, for example, today, Sophie Bush is getting her first opportunity. She's in the game day 18. She's from Iowa. Her tape is really good. She's athletically gifted. I think she could be someone who could be an absolute banger on the wing. Think of in the mold of a Jill Bennett or a bigger Mariah Wynn, that type of a player. And she was, all Big Ten freshman team. I mean, serious pedigree. Haven't been able to see her yet. Bluen is seeing her first minutes in the game day 18. Haven't seen her yet, so that's interesting. The starting 11 for Aurora, if folks want me to just read it out loud, I'll tweet it too. I'm making some assumptions about where people are playing because a lot of these players can play multiple spots.
And so people know Matt discovered this, but like we had been getting Brian Decker had been sending us this stuff. Shout out to Brian if he's watching. But Matt discovered also on the W League website, if you go to the schedule and just go to the side of where the matchup is, click on the 3 dots. And it will show as soon as the teams have submitted it. So like today, Aurora's is in there and they do their best to put like a shape. We don't know if that's accurate, but Matt's going to do a little surmising.
I think the shape they throw on there is completely just invented. Like I think the software takes the positions that people have and just puts them somewhere. I'm going to use
AI.
I'm going to use my assumptions based on, seeing every game and seeing some training and talking to Colette. So I believe the starting lineup tonight will be Taylor Kane in goal, which is not a question. She started every time. Khalees Barton, Addie Wickers, Nicole Norfolk, and Alicia Donnelly on the back line as the back 4. It's possible one of them moved, but I think that's the back 4. Got Morgan Stone at the 6 again. Again, this year she's really had to sort of truly hold versus playing that box-to-box 8 role. I believe we'll have Kat Rapp and Katie Duong in front of Morgan Stone, so that should be a very, very fun attacking midfield partnership. Those two are just absolute killers. Jelena Zbilic back in the starting 11. I'm assuming out on the wing. I would assume at right wing. Mariah Wynn probably at home on her left wing. And then I believe it would be Lydia Rupert up top as the 9. Again, in that front 5, there could be some things that are switching around. Who knows? And then on the benches, Mio in goal, Sophie French, Sophie Bush, Wirtz, Bluen, Lori, and Sattler, which is a pretty, nothing crazy, although Bluen and Bush seeing their first time in the game day 18. So That's an even more athletic front five than we typically have seen. So if I were coaching it, everyone knows my obsession with the press. I would run a very high line press with that group. They were even running a high line press with Soapy French, who's more of like a hold up power, nine. So yeah, it'll be fun to see.
Yeah, and shout out, I will say, nice to be able to get those lineups ahead. One thing Aurora also does, they put out pregame notes, and it's like, I like having little things like they keep track of all-time points leaders and things on there. So
Cat
I have
rap,
to
baby.
imagine, yeah, like the Cat Rap is the all-time leader. That happened last game, right? Or no?
Yep.
Yeah, so Maya Hansen's behind her, trying to get her leg back so she can get that record back. That'll be tough because Cat's going to get some points. But yeah, that very nice to get those notes. Looking at Rochester, I want to spotlight one player. We always love to see the people getting international spots. We got a couple Minnesotans who are doing that right now, right? Who was in the US camp from Minnesota?
Yeah, we had a funny situation where there was actually an overlap with the U20 camp and U19 camp. So
Yeah.
Maddie Deline, who's been a mainstay with the U20s, we went down and covered her in person in the Dominican Republic when she was on the CONCACAF Championship team. They've qualified for the World Cup. The schedule is out. So I would expect her to be down in Colombia for the U20 World Cup this fall. It's vaguely in like the non-conference season of the college season. And then Izzy Engel, who's in the U19s, and I think now has been in 4 camps. So both of them are really, really consistent call-ups. Izzy Engel's heading to Notre Dame in the fall. She scored her first, I believe, her first goal for the U.S. Youth Yanks, which was really, really fun.
Yeah.
Both of them, Edina Project. Shout out to Katie Offed, the Edina High School coach down there, or recently retired Edina High School coach, who's been a great friend to Equal Time. But yeah, Izzy Engel and Maddie Deline playing for the U.S. youth ranks. But I know Rochester has a couple players who have some national team experience.
They have a couple. I was able to dig up at least the basics. Some youth tournaments, it's not easy. But Kelsey Villatoro, who plays at Nichols State or college, she's been playing for Rochester now. She is an El Salvador youth player. And the reason there were details is because she played in a real tournament. She played in the Central American Championships in 2023. So that was a year ago in March. She played, I was able to see, at least Wikipedia has some good details on this, at least goal scorers. And so I was scrolling for her name. El Salvador makes it all the way to the final. She scores the goal to get them up 3-1. Panama comes back. They lose in penalties. But so she scored in the final of the Central American Championship. So really cool to see if she'll be someone who gets opportunities going up. But yeah, Rochester getting more and more talent. Like we said, Ada Kardovic, who we had on the show, she played for the Serbian youth national team as well. So, I mean, they're like I said, talent profile going up. Rochester is starting a tough stretch. They're playing at Aurora, hosting River Lights, and then hosting Aurora. So I'm very curious to see how many points they can get out of that stretch. Anything would be good.
Yeah, Rochester has that second player who has some national team.
I forget if it was Belize or if that's a men's team player.
There's someone else. I thought I sent it to you. Oh yeah. Well, you mentioned the U20 who plays at El Salvador. Oh, there we go. We got Putri Sazali has been called up for Singapore. There we go. Singapore, cool. Which is really cool. So another Rochester player. Honestly, like Mimi Iden got called in for her national team in Africa. I mean, these players that get these national team minutes, it's just so cool and super impressive. And so just love seeing them, us getting to sort of see them domestically with all those chops.
Yeah. It'll be fun to see how many Sioux Falls City, also a team we're covering, has a youth team player who was, I think, like in the conversations to try and get to a pro team, but they're too young, and so I forget their name at the time.
Spitzer, who I think is only 15, and
14, very young.
Or maybe plays on the U15s. And when she was playing for Sioux Falls in that scrimmage with Aurora, it was wild to see her out there because she did not look out of place. But then you see her face and like you see her in person, and it's man, it's super impressive to see a player that age, battling against literal grown adults. I mean, it's just very cool.
Well, the U.S. women had a 16-year-old debut. She plays at Ajax. Like, she had moved to to Ajax when she was 8, and I forget I didn't write down her name, but yeah, that was cool to see she got that debut. But yeah, big game for Rochester, big game for Aurora. Rochester's coming in as good a form as they could hope on their 2-game win streak. They do get a break after this stretch of Aurora, Riverlight, Aurora. Then they get a couple games that should be in a more favorable position for them with Dutch Lions, Bavarian, and they do have to play Riverlights again. But yeah, Matt will be on the ground today. I'm sure we'll have some fans at the Blackheart. I work tonight. I'll be there for the post game, and yeah, I'm sure it's going to be packed tonight.
We got one Travis B. Thanks for tuning in and threw some questions in there.
Oh yeah.
So just want to make sure we're responding because folks are willing to tune in. Asked, do you think the rest of the league is catching up to Aurora in terms of talent, or that the change in coaching has affected the level of players willing to play in Minnesota? I would say this Aurora roster is pretty similar to what we've seen from Aurora in the past. I think there's a lot of high quality hidden gem mid-major folks like Joe from Tennessee Tech. You have, some Power 5 kids, but not overloaded with players like that. I think they've continued to build the roster, really, really focusing on fit. I think honestly, this is just credit to Riverlight built a strong roster, City built a strong roster, Rochester improved their roster.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think all the credit, all the dynamic with these like draws and these tough games, I would give essentially 100% of it to the other teams in the division of just improving themselves a little, improving themselves a lot. I think to be honest with you, the caliber of players, with Aurora, I would say it's pretty much the same as what we've seen.
Yeah, maybe a little maybe pedigree on paper a little higher, but it's a similar mix. I mean, and the best players for Aurora aren't the ones with that type of pedigree. It's more the players from before. I know it's still, when we talk to Colette, the coach, she still gets calls from coaches and players all the time. Like, we asked about how many people are talking to you about your players getting a pro opportunity this fall. She said every week I'm talking about different players. So I get the sense that it's still growing. And obviously, for Coach Lukic, it's a benefit when you're there a few years, because then people see track record. So to that extent, Colette is the new coach, so they can't look at that pedigree, but I think the team itself shows enough of that. And then Colette, after this year, depending on how she does, will have that to sell too, of I'm another regular season undefeated, I'm keeping the program where it is. And she said her goal this year is just to find her way of how she can foster the Aurora way, keep it going, and then hopefully grow it. I think she knows it's a tall order to keep always improving. It's not like Aurora will never have a season where they drop.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, and Travis adds, what do you think can be done to draw better players here? I think, to be honest, the competition is only going to increase once the Super League is up and running and it exists. That's a lot of new roster spots where players can go pro without needing a team like Aurora to launch them. Though to be honest, I still think the W League is going to be a really nice entry point for Super League players because it ends before they start in August. I think the W League will continue to be a good launching point into the Super League. I think, to be honest, what a team like Aurora and every other W League team and Summer League team continues to have to do is build relationships with those college coaches, convince them that you are uniquely capable of preparing those players to improve over the summer and improve for fall. And Colette has talked about that. Colette has talked about, Aurora having to convince more and more college programs, because, to be honest with you, and I don't say this with any undertone, D1 college head coaches in women's soccer are they have almost dictator level power and influence. They control whether their players play over the summer. They control when they have to report again next fall. When Aurora plays teams in the playoffs, you see other teams lose players as the playoffs go by because their D1 coach says, we need you back on campus by July 1. Right. Official training camp might not start until August, but we want you on campus so that you're lifting, so that you're acclimating, all those things. So those report dates dictate who plays where and who plays when. Yeah. And those coaches can just decide to make that however they want. And so that's why those relationships with the D1 colleges is so huge. And it's also, I think, why you've always seen Aurora get the post-college players, Donley, Barton, like all these players who are done with college.
French, yeah.
Duong, like all these players who then you're not dealing with the college coach dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Also, I mean, the area of possibility, I think, of growth is to start to get the high level players before college, which is hard because the youth clubs really pride themselves on having the kids get D1 spots and impressive signings. And so it's tough to have players leave, but in an ideal situation, bigger clubs and bigger opportunities help the overall ecosystem. And so having a player play for Aurora in the summer and then sign a pro deal still will make one of the youth clubs in the area look good. So like that's a talent area that Aurora, they don't have any, it's very not Minnesotan in the first team this year. So that's the place too. I mean, it's tough if other teams are going to start to do that more as they have like a Super League team, W League team, and an academy team. They can just draw those academy, players. So that's another way. Aurora isn't in that right now. They're using Aurora 2 to be their development spot. And they do have some younger, more local players, but still it's not the place where it's like sourcing like an MLS academy, sourcing all the high-end talent to one place. That doesn't happen yet. And it doesn't happen in NWSL either. So that has to kind of grow and develop too as an opportunity.
And an extension of that dynamic is if Aurora eventually is a pro team, if they're in the NWSL, if they're in the Super League, whatever, if they are a pro team, then players will, even if they're not pitched this, players will think, well, if I play for their W League team, their pro coaching staff will see me and I'll have a chance to go pro. And I will tell you, I've heard directly from people who are familiar with these pro teams, that's not always the case. Like the pro staff is not even always paying any attention to the W League team, but you just still think it. You think if I'm playing for their amateur team, they'll be scouting me and I'll get a chance to go pro. So that's another dynamic too, eventually in the long term, if they're eventually in the pros.
Thanks for throwing in some questions. I get sick of trying to think if I have original questions or not. So I appreciate it. And I don't ever look. So shout out. We'll try and do better with that. Shout out to Rochester. Bought some gear. I think it's really sweet. They sent us another one, which is awesome, like kind of cream colored corduroy. It's awesome. I wore it in the bar yesterday, getting compliments. People, I love the Loon insignia. I've said I like their Loon insignia more than even United's, and I love United's too.
We'll get. We do this on Twitter, but I don't know if everyone follows on Twitter. Huge shout out to all our new Patreon supporters. We've just gotten an entire flood of them this summer, which is huge. Folks over that, the big threshold who are posted on our website, Joey Wynn, Andrea Carol Frank, Dan Wade, Eric Christensen came in, Brian Decker increased their support. I mean, like, it just means the world to us. And to be honest, every single dollar that you put into this, we put into the coverage. Like none of this goes to anything else. It goes into the road trips. It goes into buying all these cameras so we can try and get multi-camera angles of highlights and stuff. So it means the world for you guys to be supporting us. We'll continue to try and do even more coverage and just really appreciate it.
June 15th, using some of that money to get a hotel in Sioux Falls. June 30th, some of it to go up to Duluth and Superior to cover Superior City. So thankfully we've got some more local WPSL we can cover. Friday, tomorrow we're doing WPSL watch along. So get into the Equal Time. We'll be posting about it tomorrow. But that was a lot of fun yesterday. It'll be fun to follow WPSL. The big teams are playing big, dude. Thunder, Salvo, Sioux Falls, all the people you would predict they're on a run. So that'll be fun. All right, guys. Stay tuned later for stuff on the ground with Aurora. And we'll see you tomorrow.